What would you do if you saw a kid getting torn apart in front of everyone, and nobody, not a single soul, stepped up? Picture this. A crowded restaurant in downtown Los Angeles, the kind of spot where power players close deals over dry-aged steaks and bottles that cost more than most people's rent. The lighting's low, the vibe's exclusive, and everyone there? They know there's somebody. But on this particular night, all that status, all that confidence, all that West Coast swagger, it meant absolutely nothing. Because in the corner, near the kitchen doors where the busboys pretend not to exist, a kid, maybe 16, 17 tops, was getting destroyed. Not physically. That would have been too obvious, too loud, too messy. Nah, this was different. This was the kind of violence that doesn't leave bruises you can see. The kind that happens in whispers, in smirks, in that cruel-ass laughter that echoes way longer than it should. A group of well-dressed men, suits pressed to perfection, watches gleaming under the dim chandeliers, were making a scene. And the target? This scrawny kid in a wrinkled shirt, eyes down, shoulders caved in like he was trying to disappear into the floor. They weren't just mocking him, they were performing. Every insult was a show. Every jab was calculated. They wanted him to feel small. And dude, it was working. Here's the thing that'll mess with your head. Nobody said a word. Not the couple at table 9 who glanced over, then went right back to their Pinot Noir. Not the waiter who walked past 3 times pretending he didn't notice. Not the hostess by the door who could have intervened but chose to adjust the reservation list instead. The whole room saw it. The whole room felt it. But everyone stayed in their lane. That's how it works, right? Mind your business. Don't get involved. Especially not when the guys doing the damage look like they've got lawyers on speed dial. The kid just stood there frozen. Not fighting back. Not crying. Just taking it. Like he'd been here before. Like he knew how this story ends. And for a second, just a second, it felt like the universe itself was holding its breath. You ever been in a room where the silence is so thick it feels like it's choking you? That's what this was. A collective failure disguised as politeness. A whole dining room full of people who'd probably post about kindness on Instagram the next day, but right then, they were complicit. Every single one of them. But here's where it gets wild. There was someone else in that room. Someone who nobody expected to care. Someone whose reputation was built on fear, control, and the kind of presence that makes grown men avoid eye contact. Someone who, by every rule of the streets, should have been the last person to give a damn about some random kid getting roasted by a table of entitled pricks. And yet, stay with me until the end, because what happened next didn't just stop the laughter. It didn't just shut down the bullies. It shattered every assumption that room had about power, about strength, about what it really means to be untouchable. Because sometimes the person you fear the most turns out to be the only one willing to do what's right. The thing is, stories like this, they don't go viral because they're entertaining. They go viral because they matter. Because somewhere deep down, we all know what it feels like to be invisible, to need someone to step up, or to wonder if we'd have the guts to be that someone. If this is hitting different for you right now, do me a solid, hit that like button. Not for the algorithm, but because it tells me you're here for the real stuff. The uncomfortable truths. The moments that make you question what power actually means. And if you're vibing with that energy, subscribe, because we're building something here. A space where these stories get told, where moral gray zones get explored, and where we don't look away when things get heavy. Alright, back to that room. Back to the silence. Back to the kid who was about to learn that sometimes, mercy comes from the most unexpected places. What happened next didn't just change his night. It changed everyone who witnessed it. Let me take you there. The kid's name was Marcus. Not that anyone in that restaurant bothered to ask. He wasn't there to be seen. He was there because his mom worked the closing shift 3 blocks away, and waiting outside at night wasn't safe. So he'd sit in the corner booth, the one near the kitchen that smelled like burnt garlic and dishwater, nursing a Coke refill that lasted 2 hours, doing homework on a cracked phone screen. That was his routine. Invisible. Harmless. Forgotten. But tonight, invisibility wasn't enough. The group that walked in, 4 guys mid-30s, tailored suits that screamed money but whispered insecurity, they spotted him immediately. Maybe it was the way he slouched. Maybe it was the hoodie that looked 2 sizes too big. Maybe it was just that he existed in a space they felt entitled to own. Whatever it was, they locked onto him like sharks smelling blood in the water. At first it was subtle. A comment tossed his way as they passed. Something about kids these days, and probably doesn't even have a job. Marcus didn't react. He'd learned a long time ago that reacting only made it worse. So he kept his head down, pretended to scroll through his phone, and hoped they'd get bored. But they didn't. They sat at the table right next to him. Close enough that he could hear every word. Close enough that everyone else in the restaurant could too. One of them, tall, slick back hair, the kind of guy who probably introduced himself by listing his college, leaned over. "Hey kid. You know this is a restaurant, right? Not a library. You planning on ordering something or you just freeloading off the AC?" A few people glanced over. Nobody said anything. Marcus felt his face go hot. He mumbled something about waiting for his mom, but his voice cracked halfway through, and that was all they needed. The guy smirked, looked back at his buddies and said, "Waiting for his mom. Cute. What are you, 12? Laughter. Not loud. Not aggressive. Just enough to sting. Just enough to make Marcus wish the floor would open up and swallow him whole. He could feel every pair of eyes in that room on him. Not helping. Just watching. Like he was some kind of spectacle. Some kind of lesson in what happens when you don't belong. And here's the thing, Marcus wasn't weak. He wasn't a coward. He was just a kid trying to get through the night without making things worse. Because making things worse meant his mom would worry. And his mom already worried enough. So he stayed quiet. Took it. Let them have their moment. But someone else in that room wasn't staying quiet. Not in words anyway. In presence. 3 tables back, partially hidden by the soft glow of a corner lamp, sat a man who didn't need to announce himself. He didn't need to raise his voice or make a scene. His existence alone was the scene. Mid-50s, graying at the temples, dressed in a charcoal suit that fit like it was made in Italy, which it probably was. His posture was relaxed, almost casual, but there was something about the way he held his glass of whiskey. Like it wasn't just a drink. Like it was a prop in a performance only he understood. The staff knew him. You could tell by the way the manager nodded when he walked in. By the way the waiters gave his table a little extra space. By the way conversations at nearby tables dropped to a murmur when he passed. Nobody said his name out loud. They didn't have to. His reputation lived in the silence, in the tension that followed him like a shadow. And right now, that shadow was pointed directly at Marcus. He wasn't staring. That would have been too obvious. But his eyes, dark, unreadable, impossibly still, hadn't left the kid since the moment the harassment started. He took a slow sip of his drink, set it down with the kind of control that suggested every movement he made was intentional, and leaned back in his chair. Watching. Calculating. Deciding. The guy harassing Marcus didn't notice. He was too busy performing for his friends, too caught up in his own sense of superiority to realize that the temperature in the room had shifted. That the air had gone from uncomfortable to dangerous. That someone far more powerful than him had just made a decision. And when men like that make decisions, the world rearranges itself to accommodate. Marcus felt it before he saw it. A shift. A change in pressure like the moment before a storm breaks. He glanced up just for a second and his eyes met the man's across the room. There was no warmth there. No pity. But there was something else. Something Marcus couldn't name. Something that made him feel for the first time that night like maybe, just maybe, he wasn't completely alone. The man didn't smile. Didn't nod. Didn't give any indication that he'd seen Marcus at all. But Marcus knew. Deep in his gut, in that primal part of the brain that recognizes danger and safety in equal measure, he knew. Someone was watching. And that someone wasn't going to let this slide. Now here's where most people get it wrong. They think power is loud. They think it's about who yells the loudest, who throws the biggest tantrum, who flexes the hardest. But real power? Real power is silent. It's the guy who doesn't need to prove anything because everyone already knows. It's the choice to act or not act, and the weight that choice carries. And in that moment, in that overpriced LA restaurant where everyone was pretending not to see a kid getting humiliated, the man in the corner booth made a choice. He stood up. Not fast. Not aggressive. Just stood. And the entire room felt it. Conversations stuttered. Silverware clinked a little quieter. The guy harassing Marcus finally looked up, and his smirk faltered. Because now the dynamic had changed. Now, someone who mattered was paying attention. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because what happened next wasn't just about defending a kid. It was about what happens when someone with everything to lose decides that doing the right thing matters more than maintaining the illusion of control. It was about the transformation that occurs when mercy comes from a place you least expect it. And it was about the uncomfortable truth that sometimes, the people we fear the most are the only ones brave enough to show us what real strength looks like. The man took 3 steps toward Marcus's table. That's all it took. 3 steps, and the entire energy of the room rewired itself. Comment below, this is real power. Those 3 steps felt like they took an eternity. Every inch the man covered seemed to pull the oxygen out of the room. The clatter of silverware stopped. The low hum of background music became painfully audible. Even the kitchen noise seemed to fade as if the entire building was holding its breath. The guy who'd been tearing into Marcus, let's call him Brad because he absolutely looked like a Brad, finally turned around. His smirk was still there, but it was thinner now. Fragile. Like a mask that didn't quite fit anymore. He looked the man up and down, trying to size him up, trying to figure out if this was someone he needed to worry about. And for a second, just a second, Brad considered doubling down. You could see it in his eyes. That flicker of ego, that stubborn refusal to back down in front of his buddies. But then the man stopped. Right next to their table. Close enough that Brad had to tilt his head back to meet his gaze. And whatever Brad saw in those eyes, whatever cold, ancient weight lived behind them, it killed the smirk instantly. The man didn't say anything. He just stood there. Hands in his pockets. Expression unreadable. But his presence was deafening. Brad cleared his throat. Can we help you with something? Still nothing. Just that steady, unblinking stare. The kind of look that doesn't threaten. Doesn't need to. It just is. It's the look of someone who's seen things, done things, survived things that would break most people. Someone who's made decisions in rooms where mercy wasn't an option. Someone who's carried the weight of those decisions long enough to know exactly what they cost. One of Brad's friends shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Another reached for his water glass, suddenly very interested in hydration. The fourth guy, the quiet one who'd been laughing the hardest, looked down at his plate like it held the secrets of the universe. And Marcus, still frozen in his corner booth, felt something he hadn't felt all night. Hope. Not the loud, obvious kind. Not the someone's gonna save me kind. But the quiet, fragile kind. The kind that whispers, maybe this ends differently. Brad tried again, his voice a little less confident this time. Look man, we're just having a conversation. No big deal. The man tilted his head slightly. Still didn't speak. Just let the silence do the work. And here's the thing about silence. When it comes from someone like him, it's not empty. It's full. Full of judgment. Full of consequence. Full of every possible outcome. Brad's little pea brain was suddenly racing to calculate. Finally, after what felt like a full minute but was probably closer to 10 seconds, the man spoke. His voice was low, calm, almost gentle. But it carried. What carried? Is that right? 2 words. That's all it took. 2 words, and Brad's entire nervous system went into overdrive. Because those words weren't a question. They were a test. And Brad was failing it in real time. Yeah, I mean we were just, you know. Brad's voice trailed off. He looked at his friends for backup, but they were all suddenly fascinated by literally anything else. The menu. The ceiling. Their phones. Anything to avoid being part of whatever this was. The man took another step forward. Now he was standing directly between Brad and Marcus. A human barrier. A wall of calm, controlled power that made it very clear. If you want to get to that kid, you go through me first. And nobody was going through him. Brad's face went from smug to pale in about 3 seconds. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. We didn't mean anything by it. Just messing around. The man let that statement hang in the air for a moment. Then, without breaking eye contact with Brad, he spoke again. This time, his words were directed at Marcus. You alright, son? Marcus blinked. Nobody had called him son in years. Not since his dad left. The word hit him harder than any insult Brad had thrown his way. He nodded, not trusting his voice. The man finally looked away from Brad, who visibly exhaled like he'd just been granted parole, and turned his attention fully to Marcus. And here's where things got interesting. Because in that moment, something shifted in the man's expression. Not much. Just a flicker. A micro-emotion that lasted less than a heartbeat. But it was there. Recognition. Not of Marcus specifically. But of something in Marcus. Something the man had seen before. Maybe in a mirror decades ago. Maybe in another kid in another place in another life. The look of someone who's trying to stay small, trying to stay safe, trying to survive in a world that doesn't give a damn about them. The man's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. His eyes darkened, just for a second, like a cloud passing over the sun. And if you've been watching closely, really closely, you might have seen his hand form a fist in his pocket. Not aggressive. Not threatening. Just remembering. Processing. Deciding. Whatever he saw in Marcus, it mattered. It mattered enough to make a man who'd built an empire on fear and respect risk that reputation for a kid he didn't know. It mattered enough to make him stand between Marcus and the world, even though he had nothing to gain from it. It mattered enough to make him stay. Because here's the truth that most people don't want to admit. We see ourselves in other people. And sometimes when we see someone going through what we went through, when we see them alone and scared and powerless the way we once were, we have a choice. We can walk away, tell ourselves it's not our problem, protect the fortress we've built around our own pain. Or we can step up. We can be the person we needed back then. And this man, this feared, respected, untouchable figure who probably hadn't asked anyone for permission in 20 years, was choosing the latter. He pulled out a chair at Marcus's table and sat down. Didn't ask, didn't explain. Just sat. Like they were old friends catching up. Like this was the most natural thing in the world. Brad and his crew took the hint. They mumbled something about needing to leave, threw some cash on the table, way more than their bill, like they were paying a toll to escape, and headed for the exit without another word. The entire restaurant watched them go. Some people looked relieved. Others looked confused. A few looked disappointed, like they'd been hoping for a different kind of show. But Marcus just looked at the man sitting across from him. This stranger who'd appeared out of nowhere and changed everything without throwing a punch, without raising his voice, without doing anything except being there. "Thank you," Marcus managed to whisper. The man waved it off like it was nothing. "Don't thank me yet. We're not done here." And that's when Marcus realized, this wasn't just about scaring off some bullies. This was about something deeper. Something that had been triggered in this man the moment he saw Marcus sitting alone, taking abuse, accepting it like it was normal. This was about a wound that never fully healed. About a memory that still burned. About a decision that, once made, couldn't be unmade. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because what happened next wasn't a Hollywood moment. There was no dramatic speech. No life-changing advice delivered with a soundtrack. What happened next was quieter. More personal. And infinitely more powerful. It was the kind of transformation that happens when someone looks at you and sees you, really sees you, for the first time. When they acknowledge your pain without trying to fix it, your struggle without trying to diminish it, your existence without trying to justify it. The man pulled out his phone, made a quick call, and within minutes, a waiter appeared with 2 plates of food. Real food. Not the cheap stuff. The kind of meal Marcus had walked past 1,000 times on his way to that corner booth but never imagined tasting. "Eat," the man said simply. Marcus hesitated. "I can't. I don't have money for." "I didn't ask if you had money. I said eat." Write in the comments, we never forget who showed up when nobody else was looking. Because I know there's someone out there who's already lived through this, or who was that person to someone else. And look, these stories only reach more people when you leave your mark down here. Every comment, every like, is what makes the algorithm understand that this matters. That it's worth spreading. So, if you're feeling something from this story, tell me below. Share your own experience. Because this space only exists because of you. Now, let me tell you what happened when Marcus picked up that fork. Comment below. That's true empathy. Marcus picked up the fork like it might vanish if he moved too fast. His hand was shaking, not from fear anymore but from something else. Something he couldn't name. The plate in front of him was ridiculous. Perfectly seared steak, roasted vegetables that actually looked like vegetables instead of mush, mashed potatoes with butter pooling in the center like liquid gold. It was the kind of meal you see in movies. The kind that reminds you just how far away you are from that life. He took a bite. And for a moment, everything else disappeared. The humiliation. The shame. The weight of being invisible. It all faded into the background, replaced by the simple, undeniable reality that someone had seen him. Someone had cared enough to do something about it. The man across from him didn't eat. He just watched. Not in a creepy way. Not in a judgmental way. Just present. Like he was making sure Marcus knew he wasn't alone. That whatever happened next, someone was in his corner. After a few bites, Marcus finally worked up the courage to speak. "Why are you doing this?" The man took a slow sip of his whiskey, considering the question like it was the first time anyone had ever asked him something that mattered. "You ever feel like you're drowning and everyone around you is just watching?" Marcus froze. That was it. That was exactly it. That's what tonight had felt like. That's what a lot of nights felt like. He nodded. "Yeah," the man said quietly. "Me too." There was a weight to those words. A history that Marcus didn't fully understand but could feel in his bones. This wasn't just some rich guy playing hero. This was someone who knew. Who'd been there. Who carried scars that didn't show on the surface but ran deep enough to change the way he moved through the world. The man leaned back in his chair and for the first time, Marcus noticed details he'd missed before. The way the man's knuckles were slightly scarred. The way his suit, expensive as it was, couldn't quite hide the tension in his shoulders. The way his eyes scanned the room every few seconds, not paranoid, just aware. Always aware. Like he'd learned a long time ago that letting your guard down, even for a second, could cost you everything. "What's your name?" the man asked. "Marcus." "Marcus." The man repeated it like he was filing it away somewhere important. "I'm Vincent." The name didn't mean anything to Marcus. But it meant something to everyone else in the restaurant. You could tell by the way the manager suddenly appeared at their table, all smiles and deference, asking if everything was to Vincent's liking. By the way a couple at a nearby table whispered to each other and quickly looked away when Vincent glanced in their direction. By the way the entire staff moved just a little faster, a little more carefully, whenever they were within 10 feet of him. Marcus didn't know who Vincent was. But he knew what Vincent was. Someone you didn't mess with. Vincent waved the manager away with a subtle gesture, polite but firm. The kind of dismissal that left no room for negotiation. Then he turned his attention back to Marcus. "How old are you?" 16. Vincent nodded slowly, like that confirmed something he'd already suspected. "You in school?" "Yeah. Lincoln High." "Good school. You keeping your grades up?" Marcus hesitated. This felt like a test and he wasn't sure what the right answer was. But something about Vincent's tone, direct, non-judgmental, genuinely curious, made him tell the truth. "Mostly. Math's hard. But I'm trying." "Math was hard for me too," Vincent said, and there was a ghost of a smile on his face. "Still is. But you know what's harder? Giving up." Marcus didn't know what to say to that, so he just kept eating. And Vincent let him. No pressure. No interrogation. Just two people sharing a meal in a room full of strangers who were pretending not to watch. But they were watching. Oh, they were absolutely watching. Because what was happening at that table defied everything they thought they knew about Vincent. Vincent didn't do charity. Vincent didn't do kindness. Vincent did business. Vincent did control. Vincent did whatever it took to maintain the empire he'd built from nothing, the one that had made him one of the most respected and feared figures in the city. Word on the street was that Vincent ran half of LA's underground economy. Not drugs, not trafficking, nothing that crude. He dealt in favors, information, connections. He was the guy you went to when you needed something done and couldn't afford to have your name attached to it. He was the fixer, the facilitator, the shadow king who moved pieces on a chessboard most people didn't even know existed. Cops couldn't touch him. Politicians owed him. Businessmen feared him. And yet here he was, sitting across from a 16-year-old kid in a wrinkled hoodie, making sure he didn't go hungry. It didn't make sense. And things that don't make sense scare people. Because if Vincent could be kind to a random kid, what else was he capable of? What other rules didn't apply to him? What other assumptions about how the world worked were about to get shattered? The transformation in the room was subtle but undeniable. People who'd been ignoring Marcus 10 minutes ago were now glancing at him with something that looked suspiciously like respect. Or maybe fear. Or maybe both. Because if Vincent cared about this kid, then this kid mattered. And if this kid mattered, then dismissing him, humiliating him, treating him like garbage, that was no longer a safe move. Marcus felt it too. The shift. The change in pressure. He wasn't invisible anymore. He wasn't nobody. He was someone Vincent had chosen to sit with. And in this world, in this room, that meant everything. But here's where it gets interesting. Because Marcus wasn't stupid. He knew this moment was temporary. He knew that once Vincent stood up and walked out, the protection would vanish. The bubble would pop. Life would go back to normal, and normal meant being invisible again. Normal meant taking whatever the world threw at him and finding a way to survive it. Unless it didn't. Vincent pulled out his phone again and made another call. This one was quieter, more private. Marcus couldn't hear what he was saying, but he saw the shift in Vincent's expression. The way his jaw tightened. The way his eyes went cold and focused like he was making a decision that would change someone's life. Maybe for the better, maybe not. When he hung up, he looked at Marcus with an intensity that made the kid sit up straighter. "You got a phone?" Marcus nodded and pulled out his cracked screen Android. Vincent held out his hand. "Let me see it." Marcus hesitated for half a second, then handed it over. Vincent typed something in, handed it back. "That's my number. You ever find yourself in a situation like tonight? Hell, you ever find yourself in any situation where you need help? You call me. Understand?" Marcus stared at the phone like it had just turned into a winning lottery ticket. Why would you?" "Because someone did it for me once," Vincent said simply. "And I never forgot." There it was. The reveal. Not the whole story, not the full picture, but enough. Enough to understand that Vincent wasn't doing this because he was bored, or because he wanted to look good, or because he had some ulterior motive. He was doing it because he remembered what it felt like to be alone, to be powerless, to be the kid nobody gave a damn about. And somewhere along the way, despite everything he'd become, despite all the moral compromises and brutal decisions and nights that probably haunted him more than he'd ever admit, Vincent had decided that when he saw himself in someone else, he wouldn't look away. Marcus's eyes started to burn. He blinked hard, refusing to cry in front of this man. But his voice cracked anyway when he said, "Thank you." Vincent stood up. The meal was over. The moment was ending. But before he left, he put a hand on Marcus's shoulder. It was a simple gesture, almost fatherly, and it carried more weight than any speech could have. "You're gonna be all right, kid. You hear me? You're gonna be all right." Marcus nodded, not trusting himself to speak. Vincent walked toward the exit, and the room seemed to exhale. People went back to their meals, their conversations, their carefully constructed lives. The show was over. But the impact, the real lasting impact, was just beginning. Because here's what nobody in that restaurant understood yet. Vincent hadn't just fed a hungry kid. He hadn't just scared off some bullies. He'd made a choice. A public choice. A choice that said, in a language everyone in that world understood, that Marcus was under his protection. That anyone who messed with Marcus would have to answer to him. And nobody wanted to answer to Vincent. The manager appeared at Marcus's table almost immediately after Vincent left. "Can I get you anything else? Dessert? Another drink?" Marcus, still processing everything that had just happened, just shook his head. "Well, if you need anything at all, you just let me know." The manager's smile was tight, professional, and absolutely terrified. Marcus realized with a jolt that the manager wasn't being nice to him. The manager was being nice to Vincent's investment. And that changed everything. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because what Marcus didn't know yet, what he couldn't possibly know, was that Vincent's intervention had set off a chain reaction. Phone calls were being made. Conversations were happening in back rooms and dark corners. People who'd never heard of Marcus before were suddenly very interested in making sure he stayed safe, stayed happy, stayed exactly where Vincent wanted him to be. Comment below. Protection comes from where you least expect it. Marcus sat there for another 10 minutes after Vincent left, not because he was still hungry, but because he didn't know what else to do. The weight of what had just happened was settling over him like a blanket, warm, protective, but also heavy with implications he didn't fully understand yet. His phone sat on the table in front of him, Vincent's number glowing on the screen like some kind of talisman. He kept staring at it, half expecting it to disappear, for this whole night to reveal itself as some kind of fever dream. But it wasn't. It was real. And the proof was in the way the restaurant staff treated him for the rest of the evening. The busboy who refilled his water glass 3 times without being asked. The waiter who appeared with a slice of chocolate cake. Compliments of the house, even though Marcus hadn't ordered it. The manager who kept checking on him from across the room, making sure everything was perfect, making sure Marcus felt welcome. It was surreal. An hour ago he'd been invisible. Less than invisible, he'd been a target. Something to mock, to dismiss, to step on just because they could. And now he was being treated like he mattered. Like he was someone worth caring about. Not because of anything he'd done. Not because he'd earned it. But because someone with power had decided he was worth protecting. And that's the thing about power, right? Real power isn't about how many people fear you. It's about what you choose to do with that fear. Vincent could have walked past Marcus's table without a second glance. Hell, he probably had 100 times before tonight with other kids in other situations. But something about this moment, this kid, this particular injustice had triggered something in him. Had pulled at a thread he'd spent years trying to bury. And once that thread got pulled, there was no putting it back. Marcus's mom arrived around 9:30, exhausted from her shift, her uniform still smelling like commercial kitchen grease and industrial cleaner. She spotted Marcus in his usual corner booth and started walking over, already apologizing for being late, already preparing for the ritual of gratitude and guilt that defined their relationship. But then she noticed the empty plates, the fancy dessert, the way the staff was hovering. "Marcus." She looked confused, maybe a little worried. "What's all this?" Marcus didn't know how to explain. How do you tell your mom that a stranger, a dangerous stranger, if the whispers he'd caught from nearby tables were accurate, had just changed your life in the span of 20 minutes? How do you put into words the feeling of being seen, really seen, for the first time in forever? "Someone, help me out," he said finally. His mom's eyes narrowed. She'd lived in this city long enough to know that help always came with a price. What kind of someone? Marcus showed her the phone number. He said if I ever need anything I should call. His mom stared at the number like it was a loaded gun. And maybe, in a way it was. Because accepting Vincent's help meant entering a world she'd spent her whole life trying to keep her son away from. A world where favors had strings. Where kindness was currency. Where nothing was ever as simple as it seemed. But she also saw something else. She saw the way Marcus was sitting up straighter. The way his shoulders weren't hunched anymore. The way he looked at her with something that hadn't been there in months. Hope. And what kind of mother turns away from that? She sat down next to him, put her hand over his. Just, be careful, okay? Marcus nodded. I will. But they both knew careful wasn't really an option anymore. Vincent had seen to that. By publicly aligning himself with Marcus, by making it known that this kid was under his protection, Vincent had painted a target on Marcus's back just as surely as he'd shielded him. Because now Marcus mattered. Now he was a person of interest. Now every person in Vincent's world, allies and enemies alike, would be watching him, wondering what made him special, wondering if they could use him to get to Vincent. The transformation had begun. And there was no going back. 3 days later, Marcus was walking home from school when he noticed the car. Black SUV, tinted windows, parked across from his apartment building. It wasn't doing anything. Wasn't threatening. Just there. Watching. At first, it made his stomach drop. Made him think about all the crime podcasts he'd listened to, all the stories about kids who disappeared because they saw something they shouldn't have or knew someone they shouldn't know. But then he remembered Vincent's words. You're gonna be alright. And somehow, impossibly, he believed it. That car wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Vincent had meant what he said. The protection was real. And that realization, that shift in understanding, changed everything about how Marcus moved through the world. He walked a little taller. Made eye contact when people spoke to him. Stopped apologizing for taking up space. Because for the first time in his life he had backup. Not the kind that would fight his battles for him, but the kind that made sure he had the room to fight them himself. The kind that said, you matter. Your safety matters. Your dignity matters. At school word got around. Not the full story. Marcus wasn't stupid enough to drop Vincent's name, but enough. Enough that Brad and his crew suddenly had other places to be whenever Marcus walked into a room. Enough that teachers who'd never noticed him before started checking in, asking how he was doing, making sure he had what he needed. Enough that the invisible walls that had defined Marcus's life started coming down, brick by brick. But here's the thing they don't tell you about transformation. It's not a straight line. It's messy, complicated. Full of moments where you're not sure if you're rising or falling, if you're being saved or just changing prisons. Because Marcus knew, deep down, in that part of your brain that never stops calculating survival odds, that Vincent's kindness came from a dark place. That the same man who'd bought him dinner and given him a lifeline had almost certainly done things that would haunt Marcus's nightmares if he ever learned the full truth. And yet, when Marcus looked at that phone number, when he remembered the way Vincent had looked at him with recognition and understanding and something that almost resembled fatherly pride, he couldn't bring himself to be afraid. Because whatever Vincent was, whatever he'd done, in that moment he'd chosen to be the person Marcus needed. And sometimes that's all that matters. Sometimes, the complexity of someone's character doesn't erase the simplicity of their choice to show up. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject. Because this isn't just Marcus's story. This is the story of every person who's ever been invisible, who's ever sat in that corner booth taking abuse because fighting back felt impossible. This is the story of every moment when the world's power structure gets challenged not by revolution, but by a single act of unexpected mercy. This is the story of what happens when someone who's supposed to be the villain looks at injustice and decides, just for a moment, to be something else. Vincent didn't save Marcus because he wanted something in return. He didn't do it for publicity or for karma or because he was trying to balance out the darker parts of his ledger. He did it because he saw himself. Because somewhere in his past, buried under years of hard decisions and moral compromises, there was a kid just like Marcus. A kid who got ignored, dismissed, humiliated. A kid who learned that the world doesn't care about your pain unless you're powerful enough to make it care. And Vincent had spent his entire adult life making sure he was that powerful. Making sure nobody could ever hurt him the way he'd been hurt. Building walls so high that nothing could touch him. But walls work both ways. They keep pain out, sure. But they also keep everything else out. Connection. Vulnerability. The simple human experience of giving a damn about someone for no reason other than that they need help. That night in the restaurant, those walls cracked. Just a little. Just enough for Vincent to remember what it felt like to be human. To be the person he'd needed when he was Marcus's age. And in doing so, he didn't just change Marcus's life. He changed his own. Because mercy, real mercy, doesn't just transform the person receiving it. It transforms the person giving it too. The people in that restaurant who watched it all unfold? They left with a story. A moment that challenged everything they thought they knew about power, about strength, about what it means to be feared. They'd seen Vincent, untouchable, unreachable Vincent, choose kindness over indifference. Choose humanity over reputation. And that image, that cognitive dissonance, would stay with them longer than any display of violence or dominance ever could. Because here's the truth, anyone can be cruel. Anyone can wield power like a weapon. But choosing to wield it like a shield? Choosing to use your strength to protect instead of dominate? That takes something most people never develop. It takes the kind of moral courage that only comes from surviving the worst of what the world has to offer and deciding, consciously deciding, that you won't inflict that on anyone else. That's what happened that night. That's what Marcus witnessed. That's what changed him from the inside out. Not because someone swooped in and fixed all his problems, but because someone showed him that his problems mattered. That he wasn't crazy for expecting basic human decency. That the world's cruelty wasn't something he had to accept as normal. And maybe that's the real power move. Not intimidation. Not violence. Not even justice in the traditional sense. Just the simple, radical act of seeing someone's pain and refusing to look away. Comment below, true power is choosing kindness when you don't have to. Look, if you've made it this far, it's because this story touched on something real. Because you understood that this goes beyond a boy in a restaurant or a powerful man making a choice. This is about all of us. About the moments when we decide to be different. About the times when the world expects cruelty and we choose something else. And if that makes sense to you, if you want to continue exploring these stories that truly move us, subscribe to the channel. Because that's exactly what we do here. Stories that make you think, that make you feel, that remind you that true power doesn't come from how much fear you cause, but from how many lives you change when no one is watching. Leave a like below if this story really grabbed you. And in the comments, write, I made it to the end, because I want to know who's really here, who's on this journey with me. Every comment, every like, every person who makes it to the end. That's what builds this space. And look, there's a video over there that's going to continue this conversation in a way you're not expecting. Click there and come with me because the story doesn't end here. It never ends. We're just going to go deeper. Thanks for being here. Thanks for making it to the end. See you next time.